Marley, remember the days of $6 a gallon gas? We're almost back there at this particular station, $5.99. Gas prices have been a big political issue lately, and now this closed refinery is only adding to the concerns.
At 3:17 a.m., while most of Texas was asleep, energy desks were already awake, not celebrating, not panicking, just watching screens that refused to settle. Prices were moving without news, volatility without headlines, and when that happens, it usually means something has already broken somewhere else. Not in Texas, in California. Because the first sign of collapse is never a blackout or a press conference. It is silence. A refinery gate that doesn't open. A pump that stays dark. A station owner who locks the door and never unlocks it again. By the time the public notices, the decision was made weeks, sometimes months, earlier. A senior Texas energy official would later describe it bluntly. When California sneezes, Texas doesn't catch a cold. Texas catches the bill. That statement sounds dramatic until you look at how modern energy actually moves. Oil, gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, none of it respects state lines. It flows through contracts, pipelines, futures markets, and refinery swaps that tie Sacramento to Houston, whether politicians admit it or not. And right now, those connections are under strain. California is quietly removing capacity from the system. Not hypothetically, not in policy papers, in real barrels, real stations, real infrastructure. And Texas, despite producing more energy than any state in the nation, cannot fully insulate itself from what that removal does to prices, supply chains, and investor behavior. Here is the part that should make you uncomfortable. Markets react before shortages appear. They price fear first. Scarcity comes later. By the time governors issue warnings or lawmakers hold hearings, the damage is already embedded in the cost of fuel, food, freight, and electricity. So the question is not whether California's energy squeeze stays contained. The question is why Texas, strong, energy-rich Texas, is already showing signs of stress tied to decisions made hundreds of miles away. And the records show something most people are not being told. Not yet. What makes this moment dangerous is not just what is happening in California. It is how quietly it is happening, and how many systems depend on energy staying invisible. Gasoline is supposed to be boring. Electricity is supposed to be reliable. Refining capacity is supposed to be background noise. When those assumptions fail, the shock does not stay contained to the pump. Energy is the base layer of the economy. When it tightens, everything above it compresses. In California, the compression is already visible. Fuel availability narrows, logistics stretch, and prices respond before consumers understand why. But the second-order effects arrive next, and they do not announce themselves with flashing signs. They arrive in insurance premiums, in housing costs, in financing terms, in debt where staying subscribed to channel is how these connections are seen before they surface publicly. Because higher fuel prices do not just affect drivers. They raise the cost of construction materials. They increase delivery fees. They push up maintenance costs for apartment complexes, commercial buildings, and single-family homes. Property owners pass those costs forward. Renters absorb them monthly. Homebuyers feel them through higher mortgage qualifications as inflation refuses to cool. Texas is not immune to this mechanism. In fact, Texas is uniquely exposed. Texas markets itself as affordable, stable, predictable. That reputation attracts migration, capital, and development. But affordability depends on input costs staying low. When energy volatility increases, especially when driven by external disruptions, developers slow projects, insurers reassess risk, and lenders become cautious. Housing supply tightens, rent pressure builds, mortgage underwriting stiffens, and it does not take a statewide crisis for this to begin. It starts with marginal changes. A few cents here, a delayed project there, an insurance adjustment justified as temporary. Energy volatility feeds inflation expectations, and inflation expectations feed interest rates. Higher rates mean higher monthly payments. Higher payments mean more household stress. More stress means more defaults, more credit tightening, and less flexibility for families already stretched thin. This is where California and Texas become linked in a way most people never consider. California's energy system is constrained by regulation, infrastructure age, and geographic isolation. It cannot easily import large volumes of replacement fuel when capacity disappears. So prices spike quickly. Those spikes are visible. Texas, by contrast, absorbs shocks more subtly. Through futures markets, through national pricing benchmarks, through insurance and financing adjustments that do not carry a California label. Capital does not care where the disruption started. It prices risk nationally. Insurance companies are already responding. Energy-intensive regions face higher premiums not just for fuel facilities, but for housing, transportation fleets, and commercial properties. When insurers perceive instability, whether from grid stress, fuel shortages, or emergency response limitations, they reprice exposure. That cost is not absorbed by corporations alone. It flows directly into monthly bills. Debt compounds the pressure. Households across the United States are carrying higher balances than at any point in recent history. Credit cards, auto loans, adjustable rate mortgages. When fuel and utility costs rise, discretionary spending shrinks. When discretionary spending shrinks, defaults rise. When defaults rise, lenders tighten further. The cycle feeds itself, and energy is one of the fastest ways to trigger that cycle. In California, the pressure is visible in closures, reduced access, and longer distances between essential services. In Texas, the pressure shows up as warning signs, higher insurance quotes, delayed housing starts, shifting lending terms, and subtle price adjustments that are easy to dismiss until they stack. The most dangerous part is timing. These effects do not arrive evenly. They cascade. First fuel, then logistics, then construction, then housing, then credit. By the time the average household recognizes the pattern, the adjustment has already occurred. Costs have reset higher, expectations have changed. Relief becomes politically difficult and economically expensive. This is why markets react before people do. Traders, insurers, and lenders are not emotional. They do not wait for confirmation. They move on probability. When they see refining capacity shrinking, fuel access tightening, and regulatory rigidity increasing, they do not debate ideology. They price fragility. California is providing the signal, Texas is reading it. And while public conversation focuses on pumps and prices, the deeper consequence is structural. Energy stress makes everything heavier. Housing feels less affordable. Insurance feels punitive. Debt feels inescapable. Families feel trapped between rising costs and stagnant flexibility. This is not a crisis yet, but it is the setup. And the setup is always the part most people ignore, right up until the pressure becomes unavoidable. What makes this moment dangerous is not just what is closing in California, it's how quietly everyone else is reacting. Texas refiners are watching. Insurers are recalculating. Banks are adjusting risk models. And none of it is being announced with headlines or press conferences. It's happening in spreadsheets, underwriting meetings, and late-night calls between energy traders who understand one thing clearly. When California tightens, the shock never stays contained. Fuel does not exist in isolation. It moves through the same financial arteries that carry mortgages, construction loans, farm credit, and municipal debt. When gasoline prices surge, transportation costs rise first. Then food, then construction, then insurance, then rent. It's a sequence so predictable that markets begin pricing it in before consumers feel it. Texas households are already sitting on pressure. Higher property taxes, rising insurance premiums driven by weather risk, adjustable rate mortgages resetting at higher levels. credit card balances at record highs. In that environment, energy price volatility is not just another expense, it's a destabilizer. And here's the uncomfortable truth most people miss. Texas benefits from California's system when it works and absorbs the shock when it doesn't. When California refineries shut down, Texas refineries do not automatically win. They face surging demand, tighter logistics, and political pressure to fill the gap. That sounds like opportunity until insurance underwriters raise premiums, labor costs spike, and environmental compliance scrutiny increases. Margins compress, volatility rises. And suddenly, the same pressures California faced start appearing in quieter forms. Energy markets call this contagion. Not because something spreads physically, but because behavior spreads faster than infrastructure can respond. Banks see fuel volatility and tighten lending to trucking companies. Developers see construction cost uncertainty and delay projects. Insurers see increased claims risk tied to transportation and supply disruption and raise rates across portfolios. Landlords pass costs forward. Grocers do the same. The pump is only the first place consumers notice it. California's station closures expose something else as well. Timelines don't care about intentions. 12 years sounded reasonable on paper, but financing delays, permitting backlogs, labor shortages, all invisible in policy debates, stacked up in reality where staying subscribed is how those pressures are recognized before the deadline hits, and when it did, the system didn't bend. It snapped. Texas businesses understand this dynamic better than most. Many remember winter storms, grid stress, insurance withdrawals, and sudden regulatory shifts that no one planned for, but everyone paid for. The lesson was the same: systems fail quietly first. What's happening now feels eerily familiar. Not because Texas is repeating California's policies, but because markets react to outcomes, not ideology. Investors don't ask which state is red or blue. They ask where volatility is increasing, where margins are thinning, where timelines are slipping. And California, once again, is flashing warnings that ripple outward. Energy traders are already hedging for West Coast instability. That pushes costs into futures contracts that Texas consumers ultimately touch. Pipeline operators are adjusting allocations. Trucking routes are being reconsidered. None of this requires a crisis headline to matter, and that's why the fear isn't loud yet. It's quiet. Quiet like insurance letters arriving with higher premiums and no explanation. Quiet like rent renewals creeping upward by percentages that don't quite justify themselves. Quiet like grocery bills that rise a little faster each month. Quiet like mortgage lenders becoming more selective. People instinctively look for a villain, a company, a governor, a policy, but systems rarely collapse because of one decision. They collapse because multiple small stresses align at the wrong moment. California is experiencing the visible part: closed pumps, shuttered stations, refinery exits. Texas is feeling the invisible part: exposure. And exposure is what markets punish first. Some Texas officials are already using cautious language. Monitoring, assessing, coordinating. These words appear when leaders know the system is under strain but cannot yet quantify how bad it will get. They appear before warnings become admissions. Because once energy instability feeds into housing, insurance, and debt, reversing it is no longer about fuel. It's about confidence. And confidence, once lost, does not return quickly. The most unsettling part is that none of this requires a catastrophic event. No blackout, no embargo, no disaster. Just deadlines, closures, and human behavior reacting faster than infrastructure can adapt. California didn't collapse overnight. It tightened, slowly, quietly, until one deadline triggered hundreds of closures at once. Texas does not need to repeat that path to feel its consequences. It only needs to be connected to it. That connection already exists. Energy flows, capital flows, risk flows. And when one state becomes a stress test, the others become participants whether they want to or not. If this chain reaction feels uncomfortable, that's because it is. And staying aware of how these invisible pressures build before they surface is the only way to stay ahead of what comes next. Which is why staying subscribed matters when the warning signs are already here and still being ignored.